Hello and welcome to this podcast episode. Today we have Pranav, who works as a lead DevOps engineer, and he started as a MCA grad. He actually started his career journey with me, so I have we have some common memories and share that we can talk about and all. And we're gonna hear from him about his journey, how he started his career with DevOps, and how he started in Pune and he now landed up in Foster City, California. He works as a lead DevOps engineer there with Qualys system, which is into cybersecurity and enterprise security platform. As it's a well-known platform that a lot of you know about. And if you want to understand how to build a career in DevOps, how to become a lead DevOps engineer, possibly into a company like that, this episode can be interesting for you. So, hi Pranav, welcome to this episode.
Hey, hi Gaurav. How are you doing?
Doing great, and we'll start with. Your journey started with us, so we can always begin with that. But how would you, if you have to introduce yourself in 1 minute professionally, what do you do? How would you do that?
First of all, I'd like to thank you to introducing to me this podcast. Uh, yeah, so I started my career as a maybe network engineer, and then I slowly moved towards working on cloud computing tools, and there I started my journey as a DevOps engineer. And I have been working for since last 12 years, 11 or 12 years in this domain. Yeah.
Exactly. I think just to share some backstory, it was back in 2012 when I quit my corporate career. I was managing and heading the IT operations team, the predecessor to
Right.
what we call as a DevOps today. And I said, I'll start my own consulting firm. That's when I moved from Chennai to Pune. I started my consulting firm by name Initcron. I was building that since 2012, and I think Pranav was one of our first interns. I think we started
Yes.
in
2013, we
13,
started.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's when I think your journey began with DevOps. And at that time, you were just fresh out of MCA. Is that correct?
MCA, right. Right. So
Okay.
I had more of an experience on Windows, right? And you had one of project which required some Windows background on AWS. I recall it right. So I think I contributed there, and that is where while working with you, right, I gained more, interest on exploring what is, how does so the cloud computing technology was pretty much new, right? Everyone was talking about it, and I got an opportunity while working with you on this Windows machine, and I started to explore more, and yeah, that is where I started computing
Yeah.
journey.
And I think after that, you got into Linux because of the projects that you worked on at Initron.
Yes,
That's our consulting firm.
yes, yes. I had no idea about how, uh, I had never used a Linux machine, right? And from there, you gave me some exposure on a couple of projects, right, to work on Linux machine. That is where I started from, learning Linux over there. So before that, I had more, interest in networking concepts. And while we were working on AWS, right, we were configuring all the VPNs, subnets, and security groups, etc. Right. So that pulled me more. The way we used to configure it for clients, right, for the application, depending on their requirement and different needs, right. I remember we even configured NAT network architecture. So that was pretty complex at that time. That is where we gain more interest and experience.
Exactly. I think so. Your journey started as a Windows guy, and then you got into cloud first at Initcron on a consulting project, and then you started with Linux. Is that right?
Yes, then I started with Linux. I pretty much recall you were trying to explain me a few concepts of Linux.
Right. Especially NAT and the networking stuff is definitely
Yes,
something that you
yes,
need some background,
Yes.
to
Yes.
get an idea about and all that. Okay. So
That's
your
right. Yeah.
basically your journey started there, and then you started exploring Linux, AWS as the cloud. And I think we put you on a consulting project with one of the clients in Pune. And
Yes.
that was that your first DevOps related work, apart from like the cloud work that you started? And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So that was my first DevOps project. I started working with a company called as Qlogic, uh, and uh, and they had a project called as Cumulus, which was which where they wanted a DevOps engineer to take, to start from scratch. So they were trying to host their application on AWS, and they wanted to design the architecture, wherein we both started to design the architecture for them, right? And that is where I started. I got I continued the exposure over there into DevOps.
perfect. So basically, you got on-job exposure, and that's how you started, kept on learning about DevOps
Yeah, that's
further.
right.
And that was a consulting project that we had taken at Qlogic, and then eventually, I think they made an offer to you. And that's
Yes.
when you became like a full-time employee of Qlogic after that.
Yes.
Yeah. The
Yes.
funny thing is with almost this is what happened with me when I was building Init Cron. Started, just teaching people because no one knew about DevOps at that time. So people like Pranav and people with some background on maybe Linux and system engineering, and trained them on DevOps technologies, put them on the client work, and most of the clients ended up making an offer. And funny thing is, it was not
Right.
good for business for me,
Right.
but I never could refuse letting you go, because I saw that good potential for you to be there, work there,
Right.
better offers, and in
Right.
general. And that's when I decided that I'm in the wrong business. I should I shouldn't be in the consulting. I should be teaching people about what DevOps is all about. And
Right.
eventually, that's what I ended up doing, and focusing more on my teaching part with School of DevOps, and eventually
Right.
kind of reduced the
Right.
consulting work. All right.
Right.
So, in terms of your journey, tell me, I mean, what all you learned at QLogic that helped you get to the next level and enter like a even a get a better opportunity at, let's say, Qualys.
Okay. So I was lucky enough to get assigned to a project wherein. Hey, can you hear me? I think your video is frozen.
I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, so I was, as I said, right, I was lucky enough to get a project wherein the whole concept was the platform was supposed to be deployed on AWS, and the application that they were trying to deploy used to offer a cloud platform, a cloud agnostic platform for the end users to design their architecture on cloud services. So, as a DevOps engineer over there, right, I was supposed to initially I started with designing the CI/CD pipeline, wherein all the like we had to design the front end and back end countries integration of the project, and then also the deployment to be handed off smoothly in three different architectures. I mean, three different environments. That is engineering, staging, and then production. So that was my initial first, first year's target to achieve CI/CD for this project. And apart from that, since this project was solely, focused on AWS, that is where I gained my experience. So we had to, design the. So this application required, it required to build a UI for the user to, design to just drag and drop the design of AWS or the whole application ecosystem, right, from the networking to the servers, right? So as a DevOps engineer, I was a subject matter expertise to have a right user interface for or a right UI for configuring configuring VCN, configuring subnets, and designing the subnet mask and all those, right? All the calculations and numbers for that. So that is where I had to explore more on AWS, of how AWS is offering this, what are the values. So we explored AWS APIs to get the response and all those, right?
So did you end
Uh,
up contributing to some web application code, which would be an interface UI to the AWS?
yes. The Cumulus project, which used to hit AWS API, right? It used to get the values of, for example, it used to get the values of available uh, subnet mask within this particular VCN. So we had written our own Python logic to calculate the available mask, and then also beyond, I mean, go beyond and show what are the more possible subnets available. That AWS is not used to show. AWS is only show when if it's right or wrong. We used to show beforehand that this subnet mask would not be right or would not be fit in
Mhm.
this particular VCN.
So basically, you
So
learned
yeah,
about the cloud, you learned
yes,
about Python programming, is that right?
yes,
And you learned
yes.
about, let's say, CI/CD, of course. And was that a CI/CD using AWS specific tools, or was it like generic Jenkins and stuff?
Yeah, so it was a mixture of both. So we integrated Git. I guess Git, if I recall it right, it was Git webhook, which we used to configure with Jenkins. And then
Mhm.
Jenkins, we had a plugin of AWS, if I recall it right, it's called as CodeDeploy.
Got
Uh,
it.
so yeah,
So it
we
was a
integrated
AWS
Jenkins with
service called as
AWS
CodeDeploy
CodeDeploy.
that you used for deployment, and Jenkins was
Yes,
more like a CI and interface
integration, right.
integration there.
Right. So on that we also used to have pre-deploy checks and all those things. So we used to check everything before and after integration and before and after deployment.
All right, cool. And all of this helped you to get an opportunity at Qualys later.
Right.
And
So this is where this CI/CD pipeline, the way we designed, right?
mhm,
This is where Qualys had a requirement of. So they wanted someone who had full experience of designing a project from scratch and also implementing CI/CD.
got it. And knowledge on AWS, Jenkins, CodeDeploy, and maybe
That's
Python mattered there.
yes, yes, a
Okay.
lot.
I think you stayed very briefly with Initcron, probably a couple of years, year or two, and then you moved to
Yeah, two
Qlogic,
years,
2 years, and then you moved to Qlogic. So that was how many years?
4 years.
4 years. Okay, so 6 years there,
Yes,
and then you have been with Qualys ever since. After that,
yes, 6 years.
6 years. So it's like your 12-year journey today, right?
Yes.
Perfect. So, and at Qualys, so what happened next? So you started with Initcron, went to Qlogic as a consultant, then a full-time employee. You stayed there, built your knowledge base there on AWS, CI/CD, and Python also, and then you moved to Qualys. Now, at Qualys, how has your journey been, and what are the technologies you have worked on over the years, and how that has changed with the kind of evolving DevOps landscape.
Okay. Yeah. So as I moved to college, right? So initially they wanted to set up a whole CI/CD pipeline, but the challenge over there was they already had a tie-up with Atlassian. So I had to use the same logic of CI/CD into another tools. Uh, so we started working with something called as Bitbucket, which is an Atlassian tool stack. And then we integrated it with Bamboo. Bamboo is a deployment tool that is using Atlassian, this one. And yeah, we started with this, and since Qualys is a so we were platform engineers. So that means we in Qualys there are many applications, something around 50 to 100, and we were the one who were supposed to design a CI/CD platform for all the applications. Earlier, it was only focused on one tool, right? Or sorry, one application. But here it was vast. So we were supposed to design a channel which should should be suitable for everyone. So it include, for example, there were applications which are running on Python, then Java, and then PHP, etc. Right? So all the dependencies came into picture, because if I'm going to build a project, right, the server should support all this tools. So that means if a particular project is supposed to be built or integrated, right, it had to go to a particular server, because if they are expecting a Python package to be present on a particular server, we had to group all this integration servers. So that was a huge challenge for us.
So I
Along
think
with that,
this was before the container era, and what you're talking about is a
yes,
challenge
yes,
related to certain nodes having certain tools installed on those nodes. And if you had a Python application, you had to map it to that node. If you had a Java
exactly,
application, you had to map it to that node. And
exactly.
I believe that problem possibly would have been solved with containers today if Qualys has moved to that.
Right. So at that time, Docker container was also in the talk, right? But it was very
Right.
initial. So there were on the side there were POCs going on how should we move from standalone servers to Docker.
I think we are talking about
Uh,
in 2018, around that
2016, 17,
16, 17. Okay, yeah,
17, yeah.
Docker was there, but
15, I
yeah,
guess
not
15, introduced in 15, I guess.
yeah.
And then it
15 was
was,
when Kubernetes came in. So I think Docker, Kubernetes, everything would have been very new for most of the organization at that time. It was
yes,
just picking up.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So as we started, so this was one part, and over the time we started to move application to containerize the application basically. And then we being a platform engineers, right, we were supposed to, have a orchestrated tool in place. Now imagine, designing an orchestrator for one application and designing an orchestrator architecture for hundred of applications was very challenging for us, right? Initially, we just started with Docker Compose, right? And then we asked application teams to use Docker Compose. We gave them some simple templates, and we asked them to, these are the servers, and you can start using. But then everyone started to, use in their own way, and it started creating problems for other services those who were running on the same nodes. So that is where Docker Swarm came in. Like we need to have a central control with us, and then give it as a platform to application teams to deploy. So that is where I started working on Docker Swarm.
Interesting. So you guys started with Docker Swarm, which was kind of created as a Kubernetes came in 2015, and then Docker said that, hey, we will build our own orchestration engine. And that's when they came up with Swarm. And I think the Swarm, I remember the demo of the Swarm, and the key part they were talking about is the speed at which it was deploying. Of course, they were not talking about the reliability so much, but it was mostly about the speed at which things were happening, and people were
Right.
still having some issues. But a lot of people, because of it was from Docker itself, started adopting Swarm, I believe. And yeah, that's when you saw a lot of adoption of Swarm, and most organization ended up moving to Kubernetes eventually, I believe.
Yeah, you said it true that it was easy to deploy, easy to manage, but not reliable. So, the containers that those were coming up, right? There were no life cycle defined for it. So it used to go down. So we had to monitor it very closely. Uh, and then there were no pre and post hooks available with Docker Swarm at that time. That was another challenge for us. Like we were getting so many requirements from applications that they need to do few tasks before they deploy their application, and then after deploy the application, right? Then we had to, introduce some custom scripts in place, right? Which was not ideal when you are designing an architecture for all the, for all the whole Qualys and applications, right? So yeah, that was the challenge that we faced very much. That is where we started exploring Kubernetes. So Kubernetes, we took it as a pilot project to check if it's, because at that time it was pretty new for everyone, Kubernetes tool. it took some time to understand
Yeah, I think
us. Yeah,
the biggest deal about Kubernetes was the learning curve, and people wanted to
yes,
avoid it, and Docker Swarm gave a very quick, you know,
you're right.
uh, way to.
We were used to Docker Compose, and we tried, like we were able to relate it with Docker Swarm, but Kubernetes was something else. I think that is where we even we I got in touch with you, right? Again, like
Mm.
how should I go with Kubernetes? Uh, we are facing, like we had no idea what all things to explore at that time, and that is where we got in touch in between to understand, how should we start doing a POC on Kubernetes. Yeah.
So was it a challenge to migrate? Like we are talking about a scale of few thousand applications and many developers in play, and you guys were the platform engineering team. So was it a challenge to move from Docker Swarm to Kubernetes?
Yes. So see, Kubernetes changed the whole scenario of how a container can be managed, right? So if I recall it right, on Docker Swarm to install but any application, we used to use Ansible. So that is where I learned Ansible as well to design deployment of this. But
Interesting.
for an application team to deploy an application on Swarm, right, we used to use command line, Docker Swarm, whatever the command is there. But as Kubernetes came, right, the concept of package management using Helm, right, that got introduced. That means we had to so the migration not only involved, writing a deployment files, but we had to tell every application team that there is something called as Helm package manager or a Helm chart, right? Which where you can track your versions, where you can design your whole application deployment, right? Uh, that was something new for us, and that was very hard for us to explain or to tell application teams how to use it or how to deploy it.
Right. So there was
So yeah, the
all this
migration
knowledge sharing
involved,
and
yes,
training your teams was involved.
training the team was
And there's
very much
always a resistance
important.
when you introduce something new where people have to make changes on their own as well from a developer side.
Yes, that is a huge challenge that we face every day. If we change anything, right, there are noise, like we hear noise that why do we had to change what we are doing till now? So yeah, that is part of the whole our job here.
Awesome. But through this journey and whatever we have described so far, you got an opportunity to learn about, explore on Docker, Docker Compose, dive into a bit of Docker Swarm, and also you started with your journey with Kubernetes as well. And you mentioned about Helm and using Ansible in the process of doing that as well, right? So I think on your foundation that you had built earlier with AWS, CI/CD, like AWS specific tools, and then you started with all of these new set of technologies. And I think that was the time when DevOps was this whole software delivery was going through the transformation where we were moving from the traditional way of building, packaging, and delivering software to
Right,
container-based delivery, right? And that's
exactly.
when
Right,
you also got to experience that transformation and
right,
upskill yourself with your on-job work,
right.
right?
That's right.
One question I have, in fact, I have a couple of questions for you before we move on. One is like how difficult or easy was it? Because you started with Jenkins and maybe Git and GitHub, and then you said you had to move to Atlassian products uh, that your new organization was using that included Bitbucket instead of GitHub, and let's say Bamboo instead of Jenkins. So how easy was it to, when you had understanding of one set of technologies, how easy was it to move to parallel, just a new set of technologies in the same space?
Uh, I'll just give a short answer, right? While working with you, I had learned one thing, that no matter what tools I'm working on, I should understand the basics first. Okay, so that is where I was learning AWS and Linux with you, right? So I hold to that thought throughout my journey, right? So if you think, if I'm working on Jenkins at the back end, I need to write a logic of CI. no matter what it is. It might be in Bash, it might be in Python, etc. Right? It is just the tool or UI that gets changed. I use the same logic in Atlassian tool stack. It was at start it was pretty it was very pretty terrifying that I have an experience of Jenkins. How am I going to configure this Bamboo the whole CI pipeline in Atlassian tool stack? Right, but then over time, right, I since I had focused on basics, I tried to use the same logic. I just thought I told myself it is just a UI change at the back end. I just need to write my own logic of CI and CD. So this was an easy transition for me from Jenkins to Bamboo. On the same lines, initially, I guess we were working on Chef. If I recall it right,
That's right.
in my first,
Back in
yeah,
2013, Chef was the tool
yeah,
that
Chef. I was
DevOps was
working
all
on,
about.
yes, yes. So Chef was the tool. Even in the next company, that is Qlogic, Chef was heavily used, and that was pretty challenging for me to learn Chef. But when we explored, I had Ansible came into picture, right? So again, I use the same logic. In Chef, we used to write play cookbooks, if I recall it right. So we used to write defined tasks. In Ansible, it is just the change of. So I guess Chef was written in Ruby, and Ansible is written in written in Python, right? So
Python.
we use those same logic, and I use the same logic that at the backend it's going to be the same. I just need to write different tasks, but in different way. That's it. So in DevOps engineer, right? If you are stick to a particular product, that's not going to help you anywhere. So all the time, I go with the same formula: is clear the basics. Tools will come and go. As even Kubernetes is heavily used. You never know in next 5 years there will be some new tool, or we might not use any orchestrator, right? We use some automated orchestrator tool. You have to keep on exploring new tools. Just clear the basics.
Exactly. I think that is a good point for anyone who wants to understand how and what to learn. And that's what I keep on emphasizing. Even if you just learn Jenkins, that's good enough to move once you understand the foundation, how it works, how to build a CI pipeline. It's just matter of using a different technology, maybe a different user interface, maybe some features you will have to learn here and there. But it's an easy transition from Jenkins to Bamboo or Bitbucket or GitLab or GoCD or any other CI platform there is. And that holds true for any other technology as well. When you understand one orchestrator, you should know about the second one. And that transition should be fairly easy, straightforward. And that holds true for Chef to Ansible. And that's how I think I acquired my knowledge. When I started initially in 2007, it was just Puppet. And then came Chef. I learned it very quickly. I could because I had foundation on one. In That was 2010. And then came Ansible 2012 it was, right? 2012, 2013, I got to work on Ansible. And it was again a very easy transition from there on. So if you understand one tool, know it in depth, understand the foundation well, you can transition, easily to
Easily,
another
yeah.
tool. That's the point. Yeah, perfect. So the second question I had was about platform engineering, right? So what is the role that a platform engineer plays, and how is it different than a typical DevOps engineer role?
So in platform engineer there are many roles. Okay, one is, like, we can call, there are many domains. One is DevOps domain. The other is database domain. So platform engineer is nothing but we are providing services upon which application teams are going to deploy or run their applications. So under platform engineering, we fall under DevOps engineer. So this is how they have grouped over here. So a platform engineer are nothing but group of DevOps engineers, or a group of database engineers, or a group of MLOps engineers, etc.
Okay, so in your organization, there's a platform engineering team, and then there are subsections. And basically, basic idea is, as a platform engineering team, you are building tools and providing services to the internal audience who are the developers. So if developers need certain technology or a tool, let's say if they want to create CI pipeline or want to do cloud provisioning, you build a tool for them. And that's where your DevOps expertise comes in. If it is something to do with database, maybe there are experts in database or maybe ML, there are experts in ML who will come and handle that particular component. But the idea about platform engineering is to provide tools and services to the developers and the internal audience. Is that the right
Exactly.
way of
Yeah,
explaining that?
exactly. Yes, that's right.
Okay. Now, another thing that I want to ask about platform engineering is generally when I say if I draw a roadmap that people want to follow, like, oh, you are a fresher, you start with cloud, become a cloud engineer, then you get into DevOps by learning CI/CD, Kubernetes, Ansible, Terraform, and then maybe you become like a super specialization or a specialization where you become a SRE or you become a platform engineer or you become a MLOps engineer. Is that hold true, or is there a parallel here where you can go with platform engineering in parallel with DevOps, or it depends? What's your take on that?
Uh, so yeah, so that is true. So once you start working on multiple tools, right? Maybe over time, depending on company's requirement, you will be offered some specialization role as well. Like you mentioned of SRE, right? So if you are more interested in handling the life cycle of an application on DevOps tools, these are roles available and which are highly uh, top in the market at the moment, right? Even recently there are roles of DevOps SREs, so the employees who the people who like to manage the uptime of DevOps tools, even that is in a huge demand at the moment. And over time, at the same lines, right? Few people are interested into managing the life cycle. Few people are interested into exploring what are the new technologies in the market, right? That is where I fall into. I fall into writing automation. First of all, finding new tools what are available in the market, doing a POC on that, which is the best tool suitable for my application. And at the moment, while choosing an application or a tool, I need to make sure that it is suitable for all the customer, like my internal customers, right? Though it's suitable for all of them. So I have to do a huge, what do you call, uh, a huge detailed POC on that. Get all the data metrics to make sure that it does not it gets everyone's it fulfills everyone's requirement, and then write automation over it. Once it gets approved that this is the tool that we are going to go ahead with, write automation over it, and then once the automation is ready, I hand it to my colleague who is a DevOps SRE. So he's the guy who also started on the same lines, like we started with working on Linux, AWS, Jenkins, and then he chose a field of managing the DevOps tools in production. So we hand over this automation to them, and those are the one who keep on make sure that the DevOps tool
The
in
lights are on.
production is up all the time.
Right. So you're saying that the SRE team is the one which is responsible for the uh, application operations part, the day-to-day operations, monitoring, on-call support. All of that is a role of SRE, handling, responding to the incidents and stuff like that. That's the role of SRE.
Basically, first point of contact for anything that happens in production.
Exactly. And in your case, you're still part of a platform engineering team who is involved in
Yes.
building the tools. And when you say building
Yes.
automation, what does that mean? Is it automation in terms of writing Kubernetes manifest, Helm charts, or is Ansible code, Terraform code, or is it like writing a Python layer on top of that, or something else on top of that?
Okay. So the in terms of DevOps tools, right? Our automation is morely focused towards the tools that we want to deploy. Now it can be on Kubernetes, or it can be a tool which is next to Kubernetes. So, for example, let's say if I want to store my Helm chart, I want to have an artifact in place, right? For that, I need to. So we are using something called as Sonatype Nexus. So I need to write an Ansible playbook to install this Nexus tool. Upon that, I write some Python scripts to configure, to do some changes or configure or whatever it is. Now, let's say this is one part of automation. Next part, another part is, let's say I want on my Kubernetes cluster, I want to you use persistent volume, right? Now there are few application teams who wants to store their state no matter of the life cycle of the pod, right? So we had to provide a persistent volume tool, persistent storage on the Kubernetes cluster, right? So that is where we were exploring what is the best tool that is available in the market, and that is where we explored. There are multiple tools like this one. If I recall it right, there was one tool which we were currently Longhorn. Yeah. So we started with OpenEBS.
Longhorn is the
Then there was
storage on Kubernetes.
storage tool. So we started with OpenEBS. Then we moved to Longhorn. Then there is something called as Rook Ceph.
ROOK.
Yes. So such kind of tools, right? To deploy such kind of tools, we have to write Helm charts. Okay. We either take it from the source code and we deploy it, or we write our own Helm chart to deploy these tools. So yeah, so this is another part wherein we have designed. We don't have like we do have a CI/CD pipeline in place, but it requires triggering because we don't want to send our update all the time. So we have a Jenkins UI which is integrated with Terraform. Terraform is a HashiCorp tool to spin VMs. So let's say if I want to first bring up a Kubernetes cluster, right? I use Terraform. We use Terraform to spin the whole kubemaster and kube nodes and etcd, etc.
On some
then we
cloud
trigger
platform, or it's just a virtual machine platform that you have internally?
we are across everywhere. So we have we have our own data centers. Also, we have cloud platform. So that is that is another complexity, right?
I think that's when Terraform comes in and helps you
exactly
multi-cloud deployment.
Multi-cloud deployment.
And Kubernetes solves the problem of providing kind of a similar layer, congruent layer on top of that across all platforms, possibly.
Right. So yeah, we deploy Kubernetes and then we write Ansible. We trigger Ansible to configure Kubernetes cluster. And also at the end, install Helm charts. So what are Helm charts we have written to install? For example, Longhorn, we trigger that Helm chart installation and make sure the application is up. Yeah, so the whole pipeline, CI/CD pipeline is set.
So you are not using any managed Kubernetes service, but you're using Ansible to configure the Kubernetes cluster, the nodes, the control plane components, and everything else.
So we use both. We have a designer automation. So single Jenkins pipeline can install managed Kubernetes cluster, can install self-managed Kubernetes cluster. And even if it's managed, right, at the end we have to run Ansible task to customize it according to our requirement. Right. Customize the kube nodes, configure the kube nodes. Yeah.
That node configuration you're still doing with Ansible.
Ansible.
And are you using something like kubespray, which is a Ansible-based Kubernetes deployment tool, or is it just the Ansible roles and playbooks that you write yourself?
Initially, we started with kubeplay, but the problem that we were facing is kubespray. But the problem that we are facing is kubespray used to take time to release new Kubernetes version, right? And since we being a security platform, we had to upgrade our cluster all the time. Okay, so that's where we moved to writing our own playbook to configure the Kubernetes cluster from scratch.
Perfect. And even the upgrades that you do happen with your Ansible playbooks and roles?
Exactly. Upgrade was pretty challenging. So upgrade, we do zero downtime Kubernetes cluster upgrade.
What does that mean? So launching new nodes and then bringing the previous node down?
No, we first upgrade the KubeADM versions on on all the nodes. We upgrade the kubelet version. And since no matter if it's Docker or so currently we are using cri-o, right? We have moved from Docker and we are using cri-o. So even if you upgrade or restart services on kube nodes, it won't affect the applications, right?
Yes.
Uh, the node might go into not ready state for a particular for a brief time, but it will come up. But the application will keep on running as it is.
Application will keep on running irrespective of your Kubernetes agent or the kubelet
Kubelet,
that you run on that. And that's thanks to the cri-o, you're saying.
yes.
Is that what you chose,
So
cri-o, or was there a specific reason why cri-o was chosen instead of something like
no,
Docker was,
Kubernetes
of course,
moved
gone.
from
So
yeah,
containerd
yeah,
versus cri-o we're talking about.
yeah. So I guess it was more promoted by Kubernetes team to use cri-o because I guess if I recall it right, it was in Kubernetes version 1.24 or 1.24
24, yes.
that they are going to support cri-o. They have moved away from Docker
Hmm.
and they are going to support cri-o. That
1.24
is
1.24 was when they moved away from Docker, deprecated the interface between Kubernetes and Docker essentially, and that's when cri-o or containerd was a choice. And cri-o has very well integration with Kubernetes versions. Every time you upgrade a Kubernetes
exactly,
version, cri-o
exactly,
also gets upgraded. So I think that's an advantage of
exactly.
using that.
That was another challenge for us to migrate from Docker to cri-o, and with no downtime. We have done it with no downtime.
That's excellent. So your job as a platform related DevOps engineer. So you're not just a DevOps engineer, but you're part of a platform engineering team. And your essentially, to summarize, your job is to discover new tools that you can use, like Longhorn and anything on top of Kubernetes, and also do some integration of, let's say, Kubernetes with Longhorn, writing Helm charts, writing Ansible code to, do the node configuration, maybe using Terraform to do the cloud provisioning. And then you also mentioned about you still need to write some custom Python code despite having all these automation tools at
Yes, for
times.
sure. Yes, yes. So even we have to write uh, uh, some uh, some Go tools. We had to write some custom automation, to manage Kubernetes environment and as well as Python. Yeah.
Interesting. So you started learning about Go already, or how's it?
So Python, I got hold of. So another thing that we are using Python is to we designed an interface for application teams to install their Helm chart, right? So on Jenkins, they give their namespace, they give their application name, and they just trigger install. At the backend, we return our custom Python script to get the inputs and traverse it into the Helm command or Helm options that we pass, right? That is where we utilize Python a lot. We also used to validate it before installing. For example, if someone has not used resource requests and limits or not defined, right? We used to, in the Python code, we used to do Helm template to get the details or Helm get manifest to get the details of the resources. If those are not defined, then you know we were saving time by not allowing the deployment to go ahead,
Exactly.
right?
So you wanted
So
to do the sanity checks. So all this sanity
sanity
checks,
checks,
validation, and the actual automation of certain logic is what you're still using Python for. And that cannot be
yes,
fulfilled by Ansible or, of course, not Terraform and other things, because this is like a custom set of tasks that you're doing for your own platform, your own tools that you've built on top of that.
right. Yeah, so
Awesome.
from there we moved to writing some Go templates, some Go applications to have this validation to make sure that no application deploys. Uh, for example, we do not allow any application teams to any users to run any delete commands on Kubernetes, right? So we have got a custom job in place which does this validation and only allow certain group of people to run Kubernetes
So
commands.
is it some sort of a custom admission controller that you've written in Kubernetes?
Yes, we have written a custom webhook which does
Uh-huh.
which is set up as admission control over there. Yeah,
And the reason why you're using Go for that is because Kubernetes is written in Go, so it is easy
in
to
Go.
integrate with that. I
Yes.
see. Okay, okay. That's what my question was, because why to use Go instead of learn a new language like Go instead of using Python that you already have a mastery on?
Right.
Yeah. Now, I think Qualys is very specialized cyber risk and security platform. So, how important is security, and are you using any DevSecOps technologies into your CI/CD pipelines as well?
That is a very hot topic at the moment in our organization at the moment. So we have so initially we used to handle this vulnerability, right? So uh, during my early days in Qualys, I started working on a tool called as Coverity, okay, which used to
Mhm.
do a code check on whatever whatever tools or whatever code is going to be deployed. But we were more focused on platforms, so we got less chance to work on those tools. But we were always on the toes to make sure that all the vulnerabilities should be fixed, all the versions should be up to date. Okay. But over time, a new team got introduced called as DevSecOps, which is a different team which falls under security operations. Uh, so those are the one who uh, keep an eye on all the applications that's coming from engineering to production, right? So they have integrated tools within the in the CI pipeline as well as
Mhm.
in the CD pipeline. Tools like Black Duck, Coverity, and plus there are multiple tools that they use.
Okay, so it must be like scanning your code, statics analysis, component analysis, container image analysis, Kubernetes stuff, compliance checks,
Along
and
with
all of
that,
those things.
yeah, along with that, we also use our own tool called as container scanner. So whatever image is built right before it gets deployed to
Mhm.
Kubernetes, those are scanned. Every image is scanned, and if there is any vulnerability of level
Mhm.
4 or above, it is not deployed, not allowed to
So,
deploy.
so DevSecOps is like an integral part of your CI/CD pipelines already, and you have a dedicated team who's looking into the security operations and implementation of DevSecOps.
That's true.
So, do they have some specialized skills, or are they like DevOps people with some knowledge on implementing security into these pipelines, or do they have like special expertise on security apart from that?
Uh, no, so they come from the same background that we go like we mentioned, right? Like
Mhm.
once we have exposure on few tools of DevOps, they either go to become an SRE or they become a DevOps or they become a DevSecOps engineer, right? So the base is DevOps for sure, but they specialize more into security tools. Like I specialize more into orchestration tools, they specialize more into security tools.
Right.
So yeah, so they do have more expertise into security operations, uh, but the base is DevOps for
Right.
sure.
So DevOps is like a general practitioner, and on top of that, you become a specialist or a super specialist, where somebody becomes a pediatrician or a neurologist or a cardiologist. So you become a SRE, or
Exactly,
you become let's say DevSecOps, or you become a platform engineer. Right. So
exactly.
once you become a DevOps and build this foundation, you can then kind of diverge from there based on your interest and the opportunity that you have. And based on that, what works best for you and the organization, you can choose one of these specialization. And including like now, I think we have
Yes,
MLOps or AI ops and
I was
cloud
coming
ops.
to that. So uh, now that I've got experience into DevOps, right, in container orchestration, I've started working on MLOps now. since last couple of months. Since now MLOps again, MLOps it's a very hot technology at the moment in the market, right? It comes from data science and all those things. But when you want to deploy, configure GPUs or you deploy your inferencing tool, right? You need to have a guy who has DevOps background. So again, from DevOps, you become an MLOps engineer. So MLOps requires a base of DevOps.
So DevOps is needed as a base again, then you become a specialist or a super specialist. So what does it take to become a MLOps engineer or MLOps professional in today's world? If you're a DevOps,
Okay.
provided that you're a DevOps
Yes.
professional already.
Yes. So basically, MLOps for sure. You know, for example, in DevOps engineer, if you want to become a good DevOps engineer, right, you need to have some background of the application. How is application developed? How is application deployed? Only after that, only after you understand the pain point of how an application uh, should be deployed, you bring up new tools in DevOps. In the same way, to become a good MLOps engineer, you need to understand how data science team work. What are their pain points? How is their how is the application expecting a model to respond as, right? So according to my current experience in MLOps, right, having having that background of data science is very much required. Along with that, having having a knowledge of DevOps engineer of how do you configure the whole ecosystem of MLOps. For example, if you start right, the first thing that you need to have in place is a GPU node to load the models. Models are something that are used used as a source of truth to, for example, ChatGPT, let's say version 4. It's currently on version 4.0, right? So they have a strong model that is responding to your queries, right? So models is nothing but a database which has all the answers. So to deploy a model on a particular GPU node, right, you need to have DevOps background for that. How do you deploy a GPU? When I say a GPU node, it at everyone is using Kubernetes, right? So a GPU node should be deployed as a kube node. That is where you need a background of DevOps engineer of how a Kubernetes cluster should be deployed. Now to configure a GPU node, you first need to install all the dependencies Python. Again, from Go we came to Python because MLOps requires more of a Python, is more Python centric area, right? So all the we need to configure all the GPU nodes using Ansible playbooks, configure the Python package and all those things. Something called as CUDA. CUDA is to be installed on GPU nodes and all those things. So that is the first part where DevOps engineers background helped me, and then trying to understand what a data science does and what are his pain point is what is required to become a good MLOps engineer.
I see. So what you're saying is to become an MLOps engineer or anything, you need some domain knowledge. As you said, started talking about DevOps has to have some knowledge about application that you're deploying and dealing with. Similarly, if you want to become a MLOps professional or a MLOps engineer rather, you need it's an operational thing, but you need to have a domain knowledge about what is data science, what is it, what is a model, what is it involved in deploying the model, configuring the model, and accordingly you have to configure the node, the application stack on top of that, configure the integrations, connect the dots, and maybe scale it and do rest of the management of that, including anything to do with platform Kubernetes, the nodes, the system. That's where Ansible Terraform can come in. And then you may have some tools on top of Kubernetes which are specifically used to run those models, and
Yeah, right.
that's what you need to configure, optimize, operate, troubleshoot, and stuff. Is that how that works?
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Okay. And see, that is that like a quite a lot of learning that you have to constantly keep on doing in the world of DevOps? Maybe that's a question that people may have.
Yes. So So in my experience, right, one thing I have noticed that if you stick to a particular tool, right, you won't go ahead. You have to keep on learning new tools. You cannot stick to a particular tool. You have to keep on learning new things. Keep on looking for what is the best tool available that can suit my application requirements. And same thing goes with the current MLOps, right? So we need to keep on looking out for new tools those are available to for us to be able to easily manage this whole GPU architecture and all those things. So yeah, so you have to keep looking out for new things all that time.
Yeah, so you have to basically get into the continuous learning mode, as we have continuous
Continuous learning
integration,
mode. That's
continuous
true.
delivery. I say continuous learning. Is it too much to do that, or does it get easier as you grow into this career, start learning new things, and does that help you to learn things quicker, or is it too much to keep up with? Because I'm just asking it from a perspective of a person who wants to make a career in DevOps and may think that, hey, this can get really overwhelming. So is it overwhelming? Is it easy, or is it interesting to learn new things? What is your experience and take on that?
Uh, See, initially, if you look at the whole picture, right, you might get, you might think it's too much for me to learn. But if you focus on the core, right, if this is the tool that I want to work on or I want to deploy, you have to explore all the tools on that. So using the basic knowledge of a particular tool and then exploring other tools is very much easy, is very much straightforward. Now, moving ahead to other tool stack, right? At time it becomes, uh, so how can I answer this in a better way? Uh, I think if you are focused on the so again if you are focused on the core, right, it does not become too much of a thing to learn. Okay.
Yeah. So what you're
Uh,
saying is, if you have the right foundation, it gets easier because you're doing like a compounding learning, just like how your money goes compounding. Initial, let's say 1 million is difficult, and then converting into 2 million to 3 million to 4 million gets easier and easier.
exactly,
So it's just
exactly.
like that. But if it is completely new domain, then it might be a bit challenging. So since it is mostly related to the work that you've done in past, it gets easier and easier and easier to learn. But
Yeah. So
continuous learning is important.
yeah. So continuous learning is important, and yeah. So moving from DevOps to MLOps is a bit challenging, but since I have good base of DevOps engineer, this this is a new challenge that I'm expecting. Expecting on MLOps to learn new things. Like so, GPU node we had never heard about GPU. Which GPU should be used? That is something I have to we have to do stress testing, load testing, etc., right, and find out the right GPU configuration. That is a
So
new
why,
challenge. That is
my
new
basic
thing.
question is, why is GPU node needed to run a model? You said model is like a database with all the information that that's where your answers lie. So is there is an answer there, or is there a processing which is done to find out that answer based on the knowledge base out there?
So a GPU is basically a configuration of a huge cores. So CPU and the main difference between CPU and GPUs are GPU consists of a huge cores of CPU. We call it as cores and a huge memory. Okay. Now, for example, if I have an application deployed on CPU node, right? Uh, the application whatever the application is installed, it gets loaded into the memory. But the same on the other side, the model that needs to be loaded, right, it requires a huge memory or cache memory to be stored on the RAM or the memory on CPU, which CPU cannot handle, right? That is where GPU comes into picture. So a GPU is basically a huge hardware that can take a lot of model memory in the store on the fly, and then integrate it with the software which can respond to your application queries faster.
Faster,
So
yes.
that is where the difference comes into picture.
Right. I think earlier people only knew GPUs for gaming applications or maybe Bitcoin mining. That is what people
I
used to
think
use GPUs
I
for.
think processing in a faster way,
Yeah.
that is where GPU comes into picture.
Anything which requires huge amount of processing at a larger scale with a lot of caching and memory that you need, that's when GPU is important, I believe. That's where models
Yes,
and
yes,
MLOps and all these answers from ChatGPT, which are more
yes,
intelligent, comes in.
yes.
That's interesting. So yeah, that's a very interesting story and journey that you have shared so far. Pranav, if somebody wants to start a career in 2024, um, who is DevOps career for? Is it for freshers or do you need some experience to get started? If they don't have experience, how can they get started with a DevOps career? So, what is your take on it? And if somebody wants to make a career in DevOps, what are the things that they must know about? And what are the areas they need to emphasize on? So, could you elaborate on that?
Okay, so the first thing that I would say is in your graduation days, right? Most of the people focus on application, writing Java code or any application code, right? But what them is understanding the OS part, right? So no matter if it's Linux or Windows, right? The first thing that I would recommend the people is to start from the core component. If you want to go to DevOps engineer, that is Linux. Understand how OS works. I would say 50% of your DevOps challenge would be is present in understanding of the OS. If you understand everything, everything is built upon that. Everything works on the knowledge of the OS. So what I would recommend is start understanding the OS, Linux, Windows, whatever you guys feel is comfortable for you. There are, we cannot say that Linux is so the market is equally divided between Windows and Linux. There are many companies who prefer using open source tools, that is where they choose Linux tools. There are many companies who require license tools, or you want to use enterprise tool, that is where they choose Windows. So that is one part. Apart from it, what I would recommend is start exploring tools like Jenkins, Ansible, and work on any one cloud platform tool, maybe AWS, right? If you go to AWS, you need to have, like, if you focus on cloud platform tool, right? Apart from Linux, what I would recommend is to have the networking concepts clear. Networking concepts is very important. Okay, how subnet works, how subnets are configured, how NAT is configured, how how can I restrict one particular subnet, not talk to another subnet, right? This is very much required during the initial days. If these basics are cleared, right, over time it will be easy for you to work on any tool.
Perfect. So
So
what you're saying is build a foundation on any operating system, be it Linux or Windows. Build a foundation, solid foundation on networking, NAT, NACL, network ACLs, and take a cloud and build those networking concepts, CIDRs, subnet blocks, and so on. So operating system, networking, and what else you
Python
mentioned?
script,
Python.
Python, any language that you are comfortable with. It can be Bash, it can be Python, it can be Go, or anything, right? These three things are very much important. I mean,
Right.
OS, networking, and then scripting.
Got it. So that becomes the foundation of everything that happens after that, right?
Yes, yes.
And then you learn about the actual DevOps technologies, how
DevOps
they
tools
can
and
get started.
technologies. Yeah.
So, if let's say somebody's fresher, let's say a fresh graduate, like you were, and you did an MCA, or let's say somebody has done a computer science, and he or she is a computer science graduate and wants to explore career in DevOps, how easy for them is it to foray into DevOps and get their land up with the first job? and what should they do in order to get there actually?
Uh, so yeah, apart from this, so if they are if they are okay with, if they are well versed with this particular tools in their graduation, right? Uh, the best next thing is to just find out a right job. Maybe they can start with uh, any job that comes as a system administrator, right? For example, operations guy. If they fall into, so starting as, to get a DevOps engineer job might be challenging because it requires some experience. So even if they start as a Linux administrator in any company, right, they can move ahead from that. Or let's say even if they start as a small program, application programmer who can write Python scripts, they can, from there they can move to DevOps, right? Nowadays I have my colleagues who are working as a QA engineer in their early days, right? They have moved to DevOps.
Got it.
They started learning courses on DevOps. They took guidance from their seniors, from their mentors, and they moved to DevOps. So coming to DevOps is not challenging at all, according to me. But if you have the right foundation, or if you have the right, if you know the right course to be done before I move to DevOps, it should not be much of a problem.
I think. Okay. So I think what you're saying is build the right foundation. And then instead of looking for jumping to a DevOps engineer role right away, which is going to be difficult, challenging, start with something like a system admin, system operations, Python scripting, or even a QA role, and maybe a cloud engineer role. And there, uh, get into that role, start building your experience, start learning, and then you get into the DevOps position. That's a better approach.
Yes.
Yeah,
In,
and if
in my
somebody,
case, I started as a network engineer. Sorry to interrupt. In my case,
yeah,
I started
sure.
as a network engineer, and then over time, I moved to DevOps engineer. I had my networking base created for me.
Right. So you had the networking and Windows base, and that's how we got started. And then you started learning on job and moved on to the next journey from there on, right?
Right.
And if somebody has a operations background, like a database administrator, administrator, system engineer, system operations, for them, how easy should it be to get into DevOps?
So according to my experience, right, what they miss is having exposure on automation tools, right? So as a DevOps engineer, the one of the primary role is to have automation in place. You cannot a DevOps engineer cannot manage their cluster manually. They need to have automations in place. So let's say if there is a network engineer or a system admin, right? If they have hands on any of the automation tools like Ansible, Puppet, Chef, anything that you are comfortable with, that can be a first stepping stone towards DevOps engineer.
Right. So if someone has
Automate everything.
operations background, all they lack is the automation exposure, and that's what they should build an expertise on. Maybe something like Ansible, Chef and Puppet, I think, are kind of not
Pretty old
very
now,
relevant
yeah.
today. But Ansible, Terraform, Kubernetes, Docker, and maybe cloud, and of course scripting. So how have you been involved in interviewing people for the DevOps roles yet, or not so
Yes.
much?
No, I've been interviewing since last 4 years. So
Oh, excellent. So, what are the qualifications that you see in a person that you would like to hire, and what do you generally ask them in the interviews?
okay, I personally, uh, to to be frank, I don't like applications which has got 10, 15 tools mentioned, right? Like as if they have worked on everything. But if I ask anything for a particular, if I ask off the textbook, it becomes hard for them to respond. So when a CV comes to me, right? I first see what are the basic tools that he has mentioned. What I expect is to, if he is mentioning only 3 to 4 tools, I'm fine with that. But he needs to understand this tool from depth. Okay. So if we divide it in domains, like containers, let's say Docker, and then we have automation, that is Ansible, and then let's say we have Jenkins. Even if they mention these three tools, that is more than enough for me to go ahead and say, okay, this is the guy I want to hire. Provided he needs to understand, for example, Docker, he needs to understand how Docker works. Or first, why do I need to use a container? Nowadays, what I have experienced, right? Uh, they try to just pick up the market words, and then they read some online, only enough for the interview, and they try to get into the interview process, right? But what they lack is the depth. Now, if there is someone who wants to enter DevOps engineer but has got no exposure into DevOps tools, right? What they have to do is they have to do self-learning by installing it in their local machine. Only reading is not going to help. Okay, they have to install it. They have to see how it works, understand how it works. Well, like, how does, for example, I ask this question all the time: what is Docker image composed of? I get an answer: Docker image is composed of Docker images. It is composed of containers, right? If they understand the basics of how an image is built, right? Uh, Over time, in for example,
You mean the overlay? They
so
should
it,
know about overlay FS and the image
right.
layers
So
and the
in
file system behind it.
exactly, so in day-to-day life, right? Whatever issues they face, all the answers are hidden in this, the basics of how a container runs. So the troubleshooting, whatever troubleshooting you get every day, right? You will be able to solve it very easily. So that is what I expect from an while I take an interview, right? You can mention only 3 tools. I'm fine with that, but you need to understand from depth.
Right. So
Or if you mention
what you're
10
trying
tools,
to
you need to
say,
understand from depth.
what you're trying to say is if somebody wants to make a career in DevOps, rather than focusing on 10 different fancy tools just because they are popular in the world of DevOps, you should just focus on maybe 5 or 4 things and know them well and have a in-depth understanding and have an understanding behind why things work the way they work and know in depth what's going on when you run a command or when you create an image, as you mentioned, or when you run a Kubernetes cluster, what happens behind the scene. So basically, what is a pod, how it works. So you should know about things in depth rather than just adding the names for the sake of it in your
Right.
CV.
That's right. That's right.
Right. So in depth rather than superficial knowledge, even if it is just a few technologies, is good enough, is what you're saying.
Yes.
And that's about filtering and qualification of who you want to interview. What goes in the interviews typically? So, are they like scenario based questions? Do you ask them about the concepts and the theory? Or do you give them scenarios to implement? Do you ask them to write scripts? So, what is the process that you follow?
So we usually start with the understanding of tools. Once he answers the basic, once I come to know that okay, he knows this tool. Okay, then I ask scenario-based questions. For example, again coming back, how can I, if I build a Docker image, how can I reduce the size of that image? If he has understood from the core, right, or if he has tried out himself, he will understand. He'll be able to answer it. Now, for example, if we go with Jenkins, right? I ask him scenario-based questions on Jenkins. How can I, what if another example? What if my so on Jenkins to deploy on any particular node, right? I need to pass my credentials. How should I hide my credentials on Jenkins output? Or is there a way? If he has tried out by himself, he will know it, right? Same way goes to Terraform. So there are many scenario-based questions in Terraform, right? Like if I want to attach five disks on a particular volume, how can I achieve it? How can I automate it? So these are scenario-based questions that I cover. Once that is done, once these two stages are finished, we ask him whatever scripting language you are comfortable. I give him a simple problem statement. What I look is I don't expect an output, but I see his logic. What all loops he's using, what all how is he declaring the variables, and what all how shortly he can achieve this particular get the output of the code is what I am interested into.
Right. And are you also open to, like, if somebody has a knowledge of, instead of Python, they do it in something like awk or sed, which is easier in, let's say, something sometimes like text or log processing. Are you typically open to that, or you would like to emphasize on
Yes.
a particular scripting
Yeah.
language?
So any they can see from this, right? What I look at is what all things he has explored to write. So it does not matter if he's writing in any programming language or if he's using any imports or you mentioned said, right? It does not matter.
Right.
The way
So
he
you're
writes
looking at
shows
the logic and how efficiently and fast he's doing it.
yes, yes. The
Even
way
if the
he
program,
writes shows, yeah,
yeah, even if the program may not necessarily work, but you look, because it's a time machine
exactly.
based, so you're looking at the logic and his ability to come up with the solution provided a problem,
Right, right. That's right.
right? So is there anything else that you ask? So you start with the conceptual understanding. That's again a way of filtering, right? Typically, whether he has a knowledge or just mentioned it for the namesake, that you can do it in 5 minutes. Then you start exploring in-depth understanding if he has any based on some scenarios. And then you also provide some scenario-based questions where on programming or scripting questions rather, where you
Right,
give a problem statement and ask them to write maybe a script to do a particular operational automation task.
right. That is all. That is all we ask, and that is all my experience that I have been interviewed. Right. That is all what everyone asks.
Right. And in your organization, do you also have specific programming scripting rounds, or it generally follows a similar format that you just mentioned?
No, we just follow the similar format.
Okay.
So for DevOps engineer, we follow the similar format.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so if one wants to make a career in DevOps today, they should know the foundation. They should then focus on the automation and the core DevOps practices, as I would say. And then, in terms of preparing for the interviews, make sure your CV is concise and just talks about
Yes,
whatever you know about. And
yes,
the best way to crack an interview and get into a DevOps position for anyone would be to have done it yourself rather than just looking at the
reading. Yeah,
theory and reading through the concept. That's not gonna cut for sure, right? You need to have
yes,
the practical knowledge. Either you have to have a working experience, or you should have built some projects, done something on your own, installed it on your own, or have played around with it. So you should have that real world capability in order to pass that interview.
yes.
Okay.
That's 100% true.
And how much significant is certifications today in DevOps world? So do you emphasize on certifications, or you don't care about it so much, but you focus more on their capabilities rather than certification? How does it work there?
Personally, having certification is a plus point. But I have interviewed many people who have got CKA, okay,
Mhm.
uh, but they don't know anything about Kubernetes.
Mm.
Okay, so they lack the foundation.
Right.
That is the thing that I have
Because they've
noticed.
they've
So,
mugged up the exams, and the
uh,
questions, it's even though it's a practical question, there is a lot of content available on what kind of questions are
and
asked.
that goes into the negative approach, right? Because this guy has done CKA, but he's not able to answer these basic questions. So no matter if you're expert in other tools, that will be all be washed out because of this particular negative point. So if you are doing so certification is having certification is a plus point for sure. It is good to have. Every company looks, and if there is one guy who has experience and there is another guy who has experience plus certification, they go for experience plus certification for sure. Okay. But you have got certification and there is no experience. I mean, it is if you're only studying for the sake of certification, then it's not going to help you. Everything gets into a negative side.
Got it. So what you're trying to say is certification does matter to as a qualification criteria to get a job interview, but the actual job interview you can crack only if you have the real knowledge. Uh, Having certification is good, but beyond that, you should also know how it works and have an in-depth knowledge of it, and that's what is important to get an actual job. So you can qualify, but may not get a actual job if you don't know things despite having certifications.
Right. And currently, what I think that everyone is facing an issue, right? So this is very common, right? Uh, People don't get enough exposure to work on specific tools. That is why they go towards certification. Okay. That is understood because like no one can get an opportunity to work on the tool that they want to build their career into, right? What is expected over here is to try it out by themselves. You Google for scenarios, right? You get scenarios in the list and then try out that tool. For example, if you want to make a career into Kubernetes, right? Only studying CKA notes and then passing out CKA is not going to help you guys. You have to get scenario from online that how can I deploy an application on Kubernetes? How an application's life cycle is maintained on Kubernetes. If you try it out by yourself, right? If you're taking 1 month to do a CKA by studying, take 2 months, take another month to do a hands-on, right? Hands-on on yourself. Even if you try to install Kubernetes on your local machine without using any automation tools like Minikube, right? You'll you'll understand you will understand the CKA concepts very fast. It will take time to it will take you time to explore this, but understanding will be very fast.
Right. So
So
it
yeah,
may take you 2 months instead of one for preparing for CKA, but it will give you definitely have, building those scenarios by yourself beyond certification will help you with the interviews and the actual real world tasks also, I think.
right.
Right. Well, that's excellent. I think those things are very insightful because especially for people who want to build a career, coming from you who have interviewed and who has gone through this journey, and someone who's actively involved in the interview process, I think is helpful for anyone who wants to build or grow into the DevOps career. Also, this is a very common question that we get about certifications. So I just wanted to just confirm. And if the certifications matter, as you said, for qualification, what are the certifications in the DevOps space that matter today?
Uh, so every uh, so first I would start with uh, any scripting language certification is good to have. Uh, Kubernetes is hot in the market. CK is a good to have certification. Uh, Apart from it, there are many courses available which provide uh, DevOps certification altogether. Like they focus on particular tools and then they give a DevOps certification as a whole package. So if that is done, even that is good to have.
Mhm.
Apart from it, I don't recall any other certifications I
How
have.
about AWS certifications or
That
Terraform?
is
Because
another one I
everyone has a
forgot to
certification
mention.
today. There's AWS certification. There is a Terraform HashiCorp certification. There is a CloudBees who has a Jenkins certification. Would those matter, or
Yes.
like only few of those have a lot of value, like CK you mentioned?
Uh, no. So see, having everything is always a plus point. Or if you want to focus your career on particular tool, then certification against that tool is going to help you for sure. So let's say if you want to focus on more on AWS, right? Having AWS certification is going to help you for sure. If you want to focus on infrastructure as a code, then having Terraform certification is going to help you for sure. So yeah, uh, I would not say that any particular certification is good to have. It is upon their interest of what they want to have.
Mhm. So you're
For
saying that
if I'm looking, yeah,
in general, certifications are good to have, but that's just a qualifying criteria. You still need to have the real world kind of exposure or
yes.
experience or some skills, capabilities there. Okay.
So if there is any a guy who with no experience into no working experience, right? If you want to start, you can start with AWS certification. That is the best thing to start with. Okay, have
Right.
AWS certification, have Terraform certification.
And
That is
maybe
going to
even a
help him for
Linux
sure.
certification they can start.
Exactly, Linux certification. He can start.
Right. Okay. So I think, is there a difference between how certifications are looked at? Since you're based out of US, is there a difference between how it is looked at in India, Indian companies versus the companies in US?
No, it's the same. It's same across everywhere.
It's the
So
same.
again, yeah. So they look at the certifications. They So certification, having certification is only a pass to enter an interview. Okay, according to me. So once a CV comes, if they mention a certification, right, that is where the interviewer, that is where. So let's say if this guy has got an AWS certification, right, the manager assigns the guy who has AWS background because he is expecting from the candidate that this guy is certified. That means he
Knows
knows from the
things.
depth.
Hmm.
Correct. And this
Right.
is same across here or India. This is
It
same
doesn't
across
matter
everywhere.
where you are,
Doesn't
whether
matter.
in US, whether in India, everywhere it's the same scenario that it acts as a qualification criteria. That's where it matters. And then, so it definitely is important for if you want to build a career. But beyond that, you should know the real world knowledge also.
That's true.
All right, cool. That sounds great. So, what's next for Pranav from here?
So as I mentioned, right, DevOps field is a thing that you cannot be stuck to a particular tool or stuck to a particular technology. Initially, I was under the impression that I am not interested in coding. So when I was graduated, right, I was not really interested into coding. But over time, as required came in, I started learning Bash. I started learning Python. I started learning Go. So I need to improvise all the time. So what's next for Pranav is I'm not sure because tomorrow, if any new thing comes into DevOps, right,
Yeah,
I have to be on the top.
I think I got the answer. So you want to stick to the domain, which is DevOps, but as the DevOps evolves, you will evolve with the technology. That's
Yes,
what you want to
yes.
take.
So
And yeah,
currently it's MLOps for me. Yeah.
awesome. So it's the MLOps that you're looking at right now.
Looking at
That's
yeah.
interesting. So this is one. No, the what you mentioned brought something up. So I get a common question that people want to get into DevOps because they don't want to code, right? Now, how? What is your take on that? So do you need to code, or as a DevOps professional, or do you not? I mean, it doesn't matter, or you can get into DevOps just because you don't want to code. How true or how false is that, or how your perspective changed over time with that?
Everyone who so during my time, yeah, people who don't like to code, they used to go to Linux administrator. Okay. But that's not true. Okay.
At least not anymore
Uh,
if you want to grow into your career.
yes, that's not true anymore. So you need to have some coding knowledge. So everyone gets afraid of code, right? They think, how can I write a code? But you can start with basics. So writing a bash script is nothing but a group of commands that you run on Linux machines, right? You group it together into a file that becomes a bash script. Start with that. Start adding logic on that. I mean, you can write loops. You can write uh, anything into bash script. You can start with that. once you're comfortable with bash scripting, right, then you can move towards Python. Coming back to your questions, scripting is required because today everyone requires automation. Scripting, why is scripting required? Because automation. Every company wants automation because no company relies on a particular employee. Okay, they want an employee to come to automate their process and then continue, right? They cannot rely on. So if I don't automate my tools in Qualys, right, my companies relied on me all the time. That is what they are not looking for. Automation is required. Automation requires scripting.
Right. So I think it's scripting plus the automation tools like Ansible and Kubernetes Manifest and Helm charts, which is an abstracted code. So I think my take on that is you need to write the code, but a lot of that code is simple, like Ansible, Terraform, Kubernetes, and with time it gets simpler. And then the scripting is something that you need to focus on, but it's not a core hardcore programming experience that you require there, but you do definitely need to write some code.
Yes, that's true.
Got it. I think with that, we will end our conversation here. So, Pranav, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you so
our
much, Gaurav. It was nice talking to you.
It was nice talking to you, and it was good to connect with you after years. And we wish you
Same
all
here.
the best with your
Thank you
MLOps
so much.
and DevOps journey from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.